Welcome to NAGLREP Success, a podcast series featuring the talents of LGBT real estate agents and allies who inspire the LGBT community. I'm your host, David Cerroti. In March, NAGLREP made its way to Washington, D.C. for the first LGBT Housing Policy Summit. Along the way, NAGLREP partnered with the LGBT Equality Caucus on Capitol Hill, and we are thrilled today to step outside of our normal real estate environment and go all the way to Capitol Hill to meet with Roddy Flynn, the Executive Director of the LGBT Equality Caucus. Welcome, Roddy.
Hey, great to be here.
Oh, this is absolutely fantastic. It feels kind of cool for me to be talking to somebody who's actually sitting in an office in Capitol Hill.
Yep, it's good. It's very glamorous, let me tell you.
Well, I first thought it would be neat for you to explain what the role of the LGBT Equality Caucus plays on Capitol Hill.
Sure. So the LGBT Equality Caucus is one of a number of caucuses here on the Hill. Caucuses are basically just clubs of members of Congress who are organized around particular issues or identities or things like that. There are, hundreds of caucuses, but there's probably only 10 that have the authority to hire staff. So we're one of those 10, and so we have 107 members, 6 co-chairs, and they all pay dues in because, they're so committed to the cause of LGBT equality, and that's used to fund our budget and give us the resources we need to, form this conversation.
Now, the Congressional Equality Caucus on the LGBT side was actually formed in 2008 by openly gay U.S. Representatives Tammy Baldwin and Barney Frank. Why did they at that time start the caucus?
I think in 2007 when they first decided to officially organize, it was soon after President Bush had made a push to have an anti-same-sex marriage constitutional amendment, and there was kind of really organized campaign against LGBT equality. Well, at the same time, the pro-LGBT equality portion of the country was also getting more organized and was also kind of raising the stakes on what they were asking for and the things that they wanted their members to do. So it was really a strong appetite among a lot of the members of Congress to organize around LGBT issues, to get to know more about what was happening. And it was really the moment, I think, that we saw the sea change in favor of a lot of our issues and a lot of what members are willing to push on the floor.
So it's not just LGBT community members that make up the caucus, is it?
Right. No, there's 100. As I said, we have 107 members, and of those members, 6 are openly LGBT, who are the 6 co-chairs of the caucus, and then we have another 101 straight allies who are just so dedicated to equality that they've joined up with the caucus.
And why has the caucus grown so much in size?
Well, I think there's just a lot more awareness about the, what's affecting LGBT people, it's become a lot more mainstream, a lot more public, and as people, I think the most important thing maybe is that as more people come out, we have a lot more members of Congress who have children, who have, close friends who are LGBT, and so they see the urgency of the issues become a lot more personal, and they want to directly get involved in the movement.
Has there been a lot of talk about the $1 trillion nearly in disposable income that the LGBT community has as playing a big economic role in America? Is that impacting the caucus?
I think, yeah, absolutely, indirectly. A huge ally, or I should say a real game changer for us is the fact that the business community has really gotten so strongly behind a lot of our issues. We have dozens of businesses that have come out in favor of LGBT legislation, some of the largest businesses in the country that have come out in favor of our legislation, and they're making the economic case for equality, that when cities, states, and countries are pro-LGBT, they see an increase in economic development. So the amount of economic impact that LGBT community has directly kind of leads, that's, I think in part why these businesses have been seeing the necessity for pro-equality legislation. And that definitely moves a lot of our members and moves a lot of, I think, complicates things for our opposition in a really great way.
What are some of the oppositions that still remain as a challenge for the group?
There's a lot still, particularly on transgender issues, misunderstanding about what it means to have the identity. So what it means to be transgender, what it means to be LGBT. There's also a really unfortunate misunderstanding that there's somehow something mutually exclusive between religious liberty and LGBT rights. And I think that a lot of people kind of exploit that difference and, try to claim that, anything that's pro-LGBT is anti-religion, and I don't think anything could be further from the truth. There's plenty of room for both complete free exercise of religion and LGBT equality. So I say those are kind of two pretty big hurdles, just a general misunderstanding of the identities, and then also, just this really unfortunate myth that LGBT equality impinges on people's right to exercise their religion.
At the Housing Policy Summit, those who attended were thrilled to meet with Congressman Cicilline and also Congressman Taylor. Can you describe the differences in both Congressman Cicilline's Equality Act and Congressman Taylor's more housing focus?
Sure. And, I think that there really aren't a lot of differences between them. They're very complementary bills. So the Equality Act would amend the Civil Rights Act to provide protection for people on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity, protection from discrimination in every section of the Civil Rights Act. So that would be housing, employment, credit, federal dollars, public accommodations like restaurants, credit access, jury access, all the ways that the Civil Rights Act already protects people on the basis of religion, national origin, race, and in some cases sex. So the Equality Act gets at every portion of the Civil Rights Act. What Congressman Taylor's bill does is it takes the section of the Equality Act that relates to housing and pulls it out word for word and has it as a kind of a separate standalone bill. So in terms of what the effect either bill would have on housing non-discrimination, it's exactly the same. It's just the Equality Act is more of a larger kind of umbrella piece of legislation, while Congressman Taylor's is very specific to the issue of housing.
Now, as you know, Roddy, after we met with you on Capitol Hill, NAGLREP came out in support of both bills publicly and encouraged the National Association of Realtors to do the same, which they did with Congressman Taylor's bill, which has already been submitted to the House. On both bills, how long will it take for us to learn if law will be enacted?
Well, it could be quite a long time. It's the wheels of justice grind slowly. So once each bill is submitted, they're assigned to committees within the House, and then it's up to those committees as to when or even if they hold a hearing on either bill. And then once there's a hearing, there's what's called a markup, which gives them a chance to amend the bill. Then it needs to be voted out of committee. Then it needs to be scheduled to go to the floor. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. To be honest with you, the leadership in the majority of the House of Representatives, we don't see a lot of encouragement that pro-LGBT legislation will be making it to the floor. Though we, of course, continue to engage a lot with Speaker Ryan's office to try and encourage them to do more to bring these bills to the floor and make sure that LGBT rights gets the full and fair hearing that it deserves. What
can our listeners do to help push this agenda on Capitol Hill?
Sure. So, unfortunately, under the ethics rules of the House of Representatives, I cannot ask any person to take any kind of action. So just with that caveat, what I will say is that generally, some of the things that are really effective for anyone who wants to create change on any issue, of course, interacting with your member of Congress is the best way. So when they have town halls, being sure to attend, to write in letters or emails or give calls, those things really do matter to congressional offices. And so calling your member of Congress and encouraging their support, encouraging them to talk to leadership, to get a hearing on the Equality Act or on any bill that may interest you can be really effective. The other thing for anyone who maybe doesn't want to call into their member or send a letter, just talking about these issues more and getting more people aware of what is going on in Congress, that there is still a problem with discrimination. Spreading general awareness can be really helpful because it gets more people asking questions, and you never know when you may activate someone who will then have a lot of appetite to maybe become an activist or maybe do something really impactful. So general spreading of knowledge can be incredibly powerful in these situations.
I want to come back to what you can do at home to help with the work that Roddy is doing on Capitol Hill. But first, let's pause and talk for a moment about NAGLREP. It was founded in 2007 and is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. Today, the organization continues to grow in size and scope with approximately 1,500 members. NAGLREP benefits include a profile on NAGLREP.com, which receives 75,000 unique visits and is the leading referrer of LGBT clients. 90% of NAGLREP members close 1 to 3 deals per year through their membership. 8% say they close 4 to 6 deals, and 2% are closing a whopping 7 to 10 deals per year through the association with NAGLREP. NAGLREP also provides networking with a close-knit group of members and, of course, learning opportunities. And also, as you can see by today, NAGLREP provides its members with the capability to showcase leadership with the ability to address LGBT housing issues at the local, state, and national levels. Roddy, I want to take you back a little bit to Schoolhouse Rock days. When we call into our congressperson, will you get to speak to that congressperson, or will you speak to an aide, and does that phone call really matter?
So you probably will not speak to a congressperson in likelihood, though a lot of members do man the phones at times just so they can get a kind of a personal sense of who is calling in and what they're saying. You'll most likely speak to an aide who is very familiar with the congress member and their positions on issues. But the call really does matter. Every call in every office gets logged and counted and described, and I know that any office I've worked with, circulates total number of calls in favor of total numbers against among the staff and right up to the member, including kind of they go into specifics of why people called in, what were their thoughts, and there's a really comprehensive tracking of these calls, and also letters and emails in the same way. So it definitely does matter, and it adds up. And some people said, not every office is like this, but some offices consider that one call from a constituent means that probably another 100 people are thinking the same way. So there's an automatic kind of amplification that if one person took the time to do this, there's probably 100 others who care but maybe haven't taken the time, and so they do that kind of math and see what their constituents are really thinking about every issue.
So local advocacy could just be asking your friends and colleagues to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
It must be incredibly cool for you to be on Capitol Hill, but I thought it would be interesting to go back into your childhood about how in the world did you get started in this political scene?
It is cool, and it's good to be reminded of that sometimes because I think we can get kind of, not jaded, but, take it for granted that these opportunities are there. Yeah, I got started in politics very young. My family was very politically active in my home state in Delaware. I've been knocking doors for candidates literally since I was 5 years old. And so I initially got started in campaign world, which is what I did right after college, and kind of being out there on the field, convincing voters, knocking doors, making calls, all that kind of, grassroots level. So that was kind of my start. And then I went to law school and became a lawyer, and that was what kind of propelled me a bit into the sort of more legislative side of life.
Now, as a lawyer in Delaware, you got involved in civil rights and different types of cases, but one of the things that must have been fascinating is you were one of the first to raise awareness about the rights of transgender prisoners. Why was that important to you?
Well, I don't want to claim to be the first, though. A lot of people have been working on these issues for a long time. I first became aware of the kind of unique challenges to transgender prisoners when I was in law school, and I did a pretty large research project on whether transgender prisoners in the federal system were getting access to the health care that they deserved. And so in that, I heard a lot of stories and talked to a lot of folks who had experienced problems and who had been on hormones in life, but then when they went to prison were not able to gain access, and that kind of immediate medical withdrawal can cause a lot of real health crises, both physical and mental. And so when I was in Delaware and I had the opportunity, I was working at a large firm, corporate firm, but I had the opportunity to work on a pro bono case involving a prisoner who was attempting to change their name, a transgender prisoner who was attempting to change their name, and the state was saying that they couldn't. and how that was causing a lot of, what your legal name is can cause a lot of issues in your life if it doesn't match your appearance or your identity. And so getting involved in that case, and fortunately I had the support of my firm to get involved, kind of led down this path of listening to more of what was going on, and then we got involved in advocating for legislation, writing legislation, and trying to get it through and pass, which we were successful in doing, to ensure that transgender prisoners are treated, equally. And given, I think it's most important to say, given what's considered medically necessary treatment. Nothing special. It's all things that doctors have said is medically necessary for this patient to, to be able to function, at an appropriate level.
You also founded the LGBT section of the Delaware State Bar. Is that how you got noticed by those on Capitol Hill?
Really the reason that I, have this job today, I want to do a big shout out to the current governor of Delaware, John Carney. Governor Carney, ran for governor first in 2008. It was the second campaign I ever worked for, was his campaign, and I got to know him well during that. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful, but then he became the congressman from Delaware, and now he's the governor. But while he was congressman is when I was working in Delaware on, as a lawyer and on LGBT issues, and I interacted with him a lot and with his staff and on, talking about LGBT issues and what they mean. So it was really Congressman Carney, now Governor Carney, who recommended me for this job and put me kind of on the radar of the co-chairs. And so it was really his advocacy that kind of got me where I am today.
Do you know former Vice President Joe Biden?
Oh yeah, every Delawarean I think has met the Vice President, and working in Delaware politics, I've been really lucky to get to know him. Somewhat, as much as his 5,000 closest friends. When I was in law school, just the wonderful chance to be an intern in his counsel's office when he was vice president. And, he's just, if there's anyone that I aspire to be like in my life, it's Joe Biden.
Well, we used that word cool before, so it must be pretty heady stuff to be wooed to Capitol Hill. What was that hiring process like? Is there an HR person, or does it work a little bit differently?
It's much more informal. it's things on the Hill happen pretty quickly, so there's it's kind of a little impromptu and ad hoc, but it was an intensive process. It went pretty quickly. It was about 2 weeks from when I applied to when I moved to DC from Delaware. I worked with a lot of different members, so there was a lot of kind of, once you pass the initial qualifications test, figuring out if the chemistry was right, if the members all feel like that they could work with me. So it was pretty intensive and pretty, if anything, personality based, the marriage of personality and kind of qualifications.
Now I know your place of work is Capitol Hill. What is it like literally roaming the halls of Congress?
It is, as you're asking me this question, I realize it is a lot more fun than I think I take it in the moment consider. It's pretty, typically staff, we don't actually walk through the kind of grand hallways. A lot of times we're moving around in the basement, to be honest with you. That's where a lot of the conference rooms are in the Capitol itself. And it's, it can get a little surreal because it does, just looking around and you find this down in the basement of the Capitol is actually all these bathtubs that members used to take baths in back in the 1800s. You are constantly kind of reminded of the intense history of this place and everyone who came before you.
Now, you were hired right before NAGLREP member and our friend Jim Obergefell won his Supreme Court case and marriage equality became the law. You had a ringside seat.
Well, that was my second week of work when that case came down, so I was still really getting used to everything, and it was a great learning experience just in terms of, press and how to work with the media and everything, because there's obviously a lot of demand for my members' comment. But that was incredible. And me being able to walk over to the Supreme Court when it was announced with our members and, attend the rally there and to, just see particularly see the folks like Jerry Nadler, congressman from New York, and Barbara Lee and Diana DeGette, all these members of Congress who have been working on LGBT issues for decades. And, I've been really leading on these before it was, a little more socially acceptable. It was really cool to be with them during this kind of, landmark moment in our movement.
What were some other really cool moments for you when you look back at your time and your job?
Well, something I'll always remember is and that immediately leaps into mind is, even though it's a little more somber, or much more somber, is the Pulse shooting. And what happened in the aftermath of that, as folks may remember, is that members led by John Lewis and David Cicilline and Catherine Clark sat down on the floor of the House of Representatives in protest of the lack of action on gun control. And to be there, to be on the floor while that was happening throughout the 2 days that they sat there and refused to let any business get done in protest was really something that felt very monumental. And just I love all my members, and it's great to work with them, but to have that kind of immediate symbol that these are people who have committed their lives to doing this and committed their lives to an incredibly difficult job, it was really humbling and something that I'll always remember.
Now, we're seeing some hurdles put up by the current administration, and in any activist work, there's always going to be a 2-3 steps forwards and 1 back. Where do you think we are today in the evolution of LGBT rights?
Well, I think unfortunately we are taking steps back right now. I think the Trump administration has shown that they're pretty dedicated to rolling back a lot of the gains that we won during the Obama administration. In terms of rights of transgender prisoners, we've been removed from a lot of the government data collection efforts, which means that they're kind of trying to hide the fact that LGBT people are in crisis or need, specifically targeted resources, because we face higher rates of poverty and so many other challenges. I think, though, there's still some room for hope, which is that every time the Trump administration has taken a move like this, there's been such consistent outcry in response, and very often bipartisan outcry in response. And so I think that the hope from a legislative perspective is that there still are so many members who really care and really want to do the right thing, and so that's going to, one, hopefully stop some bad things from happening, but two, when we do have an administration that's a little more welcoming to LGBT people, we'll be able to see pretty rapid advancement. So even though some bad things are happening, I think we're laying a lot of important groundwork in terms of letting folks know that the stakes of these issues are still there, and something really, really important.
Well, Roddy, as you know, NAGLREP is coming off of that very successful housing policy summit. And we are now focused on moving onward. It's onward to Palm Springs for the 4th annual NAGLREP National LGBT Real Estate Conference.
Right.
It's moving west for the first time. It'll be held on October 17th through the 19th. We are expecting more than 700 to attend, which will make it the largest LGBT and allied real estate event ever. Registration is open at NAGLREP.com. Roddy, what are some of the next items on your agenda for the caucus?
Well, we're going to, be reintroducing the Equality Act in the near future. So we introduced the bill for the first time last Congress, and we will be reintroducing it imminently in this Congress. That's definitely something that's really, occupying a lot of my time for now. We're also getting, more involved in, making sure the Trump administration fully understands the impact of what it is doing. And so to that end, we'll be doing a lot of kind of educational outreach to let folks know the stories of the LGBT community and hopefully get them to think twice about what they may be doing that could be detrimental to LGBT equality and to, then the substantive lives of LGBT people. And the last thing that we're constantly working on is raising up the voices of the transgender community. Unfortunately, we don't have any transgender members of Congress right now. And so the more that we can bring in transgender voices to the conversation to, get members to understand, transgender identity and what all of the barriers to the American dream that transgender people face. That's something we're constantly working on are going to be ramping up a lot more in the near future.
When you say you're working with the Trump administration, I assume you don't just hop in an Uber and head over to the White House.
Well, it's largely aspirational at this point. Unfortunately, we haven't yet gotten the kind of access that we had under the Obama administration in terms of being able to directly interact with staff. But a lot of our interactions with the Trump administration happen in writing, and on the cabinet level where folks are a little more, I think, free to have private conversations. So hopefully all of that will percolate its way up to the decision makers. But, it's a constant struggle. But I'm hopeful that in the near future we're going to have a more kind of reliable line into into the White House.
If I wanted to follow along with what the Equality Caucus was doing, is there a site I should follow?
We have a pretty bare bones website, but what I will say is we have a very comprehensive and active social media presence. So you can follow us on Facebook if you just search for Congressional LGBT Equality Caucus, and you can like us, and you'll get all of our updates there, or on Twitter at LGBT Caucus. We're very active on those sites, and so you'll easily be able to follow everything we're doing.
Well, Roddy, this has been just unbelievable for all of us to go literally inside Capitol Hill, learn what the LGBT Equality Caucus is doing, and we can't thank you and your members enough for the role you are playing to help the LGBT community, and we really thank you for that time.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I'm very happy to talk to you, and hope to be working together more soon.
Well, we've all got a friend in Capitol Hill, everybody. Roddy, it's been an absolute pleasure. This has been NAGLREP Success. Until next time, I'm David Cerroti.